clean trucks, and then version 2 and version 2 of both of the second one. So we've kind of followed the track of that process. What we heard in the executive order was there was concerns by dealerships and the auto manufacturers, particularly their lobbyist organizations. And truckers, great point. That they would be in a position where they would not have access to the vehicles they need to meet the requirements. So the executive order delays the enforcement, which would have been penalties on auto manufacturers, not on dealerships, no one in the state of Vermont, but just the auto manufacturers. And obviously there's a lot that can be said about that. It seems like, just so everyone knows, and while I might disagree with it, it does seem like it was a totally constitutional thing that the governor could do. We're not going to challenge the executive order on could he or could he not do it. That seems to be pretty clear. He was able to do that. And that ANR, in fact, could have changed the rules even without an executive order. But what we can push back on, I think, moving forward is two things. First is, if you're not going to do this, if we're not going to enforce these, how are we going to meet our Global Warming Solutions Act requirements in the transportation sector? What is the plan? And then the second piece is, if we don't do this and we don't enforce it, what are we doing to motivate auto manufacturers, and why are we giving away the bargaining chip of enforcement that has helped us get those EVs to come to our state already? So there's a lot of concerns, and definitely can talk to the advocates about that. But we heard from Secretary Julie Moore on it this morning, and we're hoping to get more clarity on it moving forward. But if you care about transportation emissions, that was kind of like a rhetorical punch that we got, which is really no fun. So, okay. So enough about that. Oh, go ahead.
May I just make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
And, I did watch the governor's press conference, and I think we have strong agreement with the governor that the lack of charging infrastructure is going to limit our ability to transition to electrification. So I look forward to seeing, next year's budget, particularly the transportation budget, to see if there is any opportunity coming from the transportation budget to help us continue or help us to restart charging infrastructure.
Yeah, it was a great point. Yeah, one of the justifications in the executive order for doing it was we don't have enough charging. Well, we should note that we have the most charging per capita available in the nation. We're actually #1 in deployment of EVSE. So if we're not doing it, but we're going to have next up after I take John's question is we're going to have the fabulous Public Health Caucus talk to us. I'm going to hand it off to you, and then we're going to hand it off to you. And before I do that, go ahead, John.
Say what I think he's going to do about it is let the next governor worry about it.
Yeah, you may have read the tea leaves correctly on that one. Yeah, because even the enforcement wouldn't have happened until 3 years down the line, is our understanding, because it's based on the model year of the vehicle, which there was not a ton of clarity on. There's two different definitions of what model year is in either regulation. So at most 18 months to 3 years is our understanding of when enforcement would have began. So, okay, Representative, tell us all about this very difficult topic of public health and the intersection of climate change.
Great, thank you. I'm going to stay seated if everyone can hear me. That's great. So I'm Rep. Deratori. I serve on the Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee. And I'd like to share just a few things that we've done in that committee that relate to climate and public health. And just say this is the second year of having a public health caucus. Our first year, we did a nice session with the climate caucus, understanding that climate is a #1 public health threat. And so this focus today is really on our built environment and the work that we're doing here that really supports climate smart and smart growth. So in my committee, we didn't pass anything really like that, but we did do some important learning I don't see Scott Campbell up there, but Rep, he's here. Okay, Rep Campbell, say hi to Scott. We learned a lot about H-181 and the importance of having building energy code enforcement. That's the number one thing if we're going to have smart homes, efficient homes, and low emission buildings. That's something we must make progress on, and we're hoping we will next year. I don't know if Scott wants to pipe in on that. He's chewing.
I mean, just as I put a chip in my mouth. Yeah, well, so we've had a study group / working committee or working group on how to increase compliance with energy code for a couple of years, and we have a third year or third session coming up in the off session this summer and fall. And we're going to try to come up with, knowing that the administration is not going to support anything that any requirements or mandates, we're going to try to come up with a more sort of detailed roadmap for voluntary compliance that is really focusing on incentivizing contractors to get better training in basically in building science. If they're going to comply with the energy code, then they really need to understand the elements of moisture control in building assemblies, and it's not abundantly obvious. It takes some training and some education. So we're focusing on mechanisms that will enhance the incentives for contractors to do that, using the builder registry, which is mandatory, even though a lot of builders still don't do it, and the voluntary certifications that are part of the mandatory builder registry. So that's a thumb.
We miss you and we like seeing you eat. You're having pizza too, so.
And we appreciate all the heavy lifting you've done over the years on this. This is a long, long slog. So I just wanted to mention there are other members of the Public Health Caucus in this room with us.
Leslie Goldman, I serve on healthcare.
Cool.
I'm Kate Lally, I sit on transportation, House Transportation.
And there is Representative Cole. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm gonna.
You sit on Human Services. Right?
Yes,
Wonderful.
and a co-founder.
Oh, Kate.
There she is.
Bob's too tall. That's our issue.
Which is so great that we have that multi-committee representation. And then I'll pass it to Kate Lally.
Oh, thank you for coming, everybody. So I am presenting something that I worked on in my non-legislative life. I work as a regional planner for the Lamoille County Planning Commission, and was helped to coordinate the putting together the Vermont Health Equity Planning Toolkit about, 2 summers ago now. So I just wanted to, it touches on a lot of the kind of intersection of health, affordability, climate change, lowering emissions, flood resilience. It touches on many of these things. And I thought it would be something that could, at the end of this legislative year, sort of help integrate some of our thinking on these topics. So the toolkit is a policy lens that frames climate change impacts in the context of public health outcomes that are negatively impacting Vermonters' health. It provides actions, examples of actions that communities can take that have the effect of reducing carbon emissions as they improve health equity and community well-being. And I think the timing is good to consider land use approaches that can complement the technological strategies that are sadly in a bit of limbo right now, so we can continue to reduce our emissions, especially given many federal funding uncertainties. And last year's land use reform, last biennium's land use reform, at the same time have increased our ability to make the behaviors that support public health easier to implement. in the process, making lifestyles that reduce our emissions and our communities more resilient to flooding. And if there is something that I would hope everybody comes away with today is that taking action on the form of our communities is something that's up to us. The legislature also needs to prioritize investments to improve our communities. And if we achieve this, our success will be reflected in the form of communities that provide healthier lifestyles, that lower our emissions, and hopefully that are more resilient to flooding. So the toolkit was developed in partnership with the Department of Health to help the RPCs, the communities the RPCs serve, increase or develop capacity to introduce health equity and well-being in the municipal planning process. And the project was funded by a now rescinded EPA grant. So would you mind just kind of like flipping through? This is just, I'm not going to walk you through this. It's just to sort of give you an idea of the resource and hopefully a sense of the value that it might provide.
Send this out.
Exactly, yes. So let's see. So the Department of Health has been a real leader in this because where someone lives has a major impact on somebody's health. The fields of planning and public health actually grew out of the movement in the early 20th century to create healthy communities. The Vermont Department of Health estimates that over 60% of Vermont residents are at risk of chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, osteoarthritis, heart disease, stroke, and certain cancers. The estimated healthcare costs attributed to obesity alone in Vermont exceed $300 million annually. So reinvigorating the links between planning and public health can help us to build communities that help people lead healthier lives. Similarly, we justify taking climate action on health, human rights, and environmental and economic grounds. Today, climate change is the greatest emerging health threat in Vermont and arguably in the world. In the toolkit, healthy and climate resilient communities are shown to share many attributes. So just kind of walk through this really quickly. The toolkit's audience, again, is the towns that the RPCs serve. The municipal plan is the conceptual framework, a vision framework for how a municipality envisions development and growth. So that is the reason for this framework here. Land use bylaws are the regulatory tools that towns use to implement their municipal plan. So the prevalence of standards that create a low-density suburban form of development have created many problems, and these are impacting public and individual health, unaffordability of life, and the absence of access to an EV vehicle increases our transportation emissions, if you look at things from the transportation side of it. The cumulative effect of car-oriented land uses contribute to diseases and other problems. And we cannot afford to ignore how land use impacts health anymore. So repairing this damage is really the work of this century. And the toolkit looks at how land use impacts public health for good or for ill, and provides examples of how communities can fix land use issues. The solutions that are within this toolkit also create many knock-on effects that directly or indirectly benefit the climate in the process. So change, even for the better, is hard. To inspire and increase buy-in, the toolkit uses Vermont examples of how to build better, showing how smart growth links economic development, public services, transportation, energy use, housing, natural resource protection, and flood resilience to health themes such as physical activity, public safety, healthy food access, mental health, and substance prevention and recovery services, air and water quality, as well as social equity. And it uses visually appealing examples to show how each step, each intentional step that we take can build on the previous, exchanging its range and impact. Prioritizing smart growth can both reduce climate emissions and improve health. Even better, smart growth measures are simple, they save money, are effective, and they are possible now. And I hope that you guys will consider taking a closer look at this. So under the Global Warming Solutions Act, we have primarily been focused on clean energy solutions, again, relying on technology to achieve this. But under the Climate Action Plan, clean energy is sort of one leg of a three-legged stool, whose other two legs might be described as lifestyle and conservation. So over the long run, the energy arc is, I believe, headed away from fossil fuels. We'll have new tech for solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, and even potentially a new generation of nuclear. And we will continue to progress with this, and these technologies will become available and obviously will be essential. But at the present, we have to weather the Trump administration disruptions, and we need to focus on what we can achieve now. And I think that looking at land use can help us continue to make progress at lowering our emissions. Cambridge Analytics estimated that smart growth can help Vermont reduce emissions by 15%. That's not nothing. So my intention in presenting this toolkit is to draw attention to the lifestyle and conservation sides of the coin, to highlight their cost effectiveness and availability as tools that we can use now to work to common purpose with colleagues, hopefully beyond the narrow confines of our committee jurisdictions. Achieving climate goals will depend on our ability to find funding and build public support. And this toolkit's utility for policymakers is assigning value to health equity and a public health lens to make clear the societal benefits of transitioning to clean energy and make that more tangible. The toolkit makes the argument for place-based investments, for instance, for fast-charging EV infrastructure installed along our main streets, something that is not allowed currently under VTrans rules, showing how this could pay for itself in measurable positive outcomes that benefit population health. New enterprises that provide local jobs, the ability for someone to meet daily needs in a walkable and socially rich environment, and making driving an EV more convenient for those that, don't have an EV charger in a garage in their home because maybe they don't live in a single family house. Everyone lives in community, and presenting a positive vision of a healthier and more environmentally sustainable common future through lifestyle and conservation can build more robust public support among all of our colleagues for taking climate action that cuts across political divides and leads to direct action now, not in the future. So we wanted at this point to just open up to discussion and conversation. What are some promising legislative pathways and programs and possibly bills that some of you have been working on? Sure, Mike's.
Where can we find this report?
Oh, I guess we're going to send it to everybody. Yeah, we'll email it out. Yeah, thanks.
So great. It's great.
Thanks.
Thanks as well.
So anyway, just wanted to now encourage, some conversation or discussion about things that folks are doing or thinking about that support kind of operationalizing some of the approaches in this toolkit. There are some current bills, for example, the CHIP initiative, some bike safety things. There's an interesting workforce housing bill, and those are just some of the ones that I know about. So I'll just stop talking.
First of all, thank you both very much, literally round of applause. I was not familiar with this, but even just seeing some of the images that you're showing, I'm like, oh, I've seen that before. So this looks like it'll be really helpful for pulling a lot of stuff together. But so you said there's the CHIP bill, which is like the TIF districts. We open it up. I don't know. Are there bills or are things that people wanting to work on next year that we could start now too?
Over the summer.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of great ideas in our, the House and Senate versions of,
Yes.
Kirk's, bill, so.
We're trying next year.
Revisit some of those.
Well, I like,
Yeah, but I'm curious. Okay, so you said that, V-Trans doesn't allow electric vehicle charging like on road. Did you say that?
Currently, like on a sort of Main
Yeah,
Street.
like where you would park or something?
Exactly, like you see in lots of other places. Well, Burlington has that, for example, and Montreal has that too. Fast chargers. So you can, park your car, charge it, and go and spend money in businesses and support those businesses in the process.
What's the reasoning that they give for?
I think, we are still in the transition of thinking about transportation as the purpose of transportation in Vermont as getting as fast as possible through our villages and downtowns to some destination rather than, between villages and downtowns, and then having villages and downtowns be for people and the things that people need in their lives, like shopping and services and social gathering and things like that. So that directs investment decisions and what is allowed. This is, to give V-Trans credit, that they have an awareness that this is not ideal. And they're working on something called the Vermont State Standards to update the highway standards. So we hope that this can be something that can be in Vermonters' future. But it's very difficult to change from a kind of car-oriented suburban development approach to, something that is more urban and urban is often has a bad reputation in Vermont. And urban just really means the places that we live. And these places occur at all scales, from a hamlet, to a tiny village, to a downtown, like Burlington, and everything in between.
So to get them to allow parking for that.
Oh, we could totally move a piece of legislation. I think what Representative Lawley is describing is the Agency of Transportation is in process of doing this really big readjustment of how they look at their standards.
Yeah.
And we were even trying to move some legislation in the current bill that was going to update that, but they said, please don't be prescriptive in your at least this is what they told the Senate. They said, don't be prescriptive because we have a whole stakeholder process and we want to present to you.
Okay.
But it's a good point. There's a lot of different ways.
We could legislate that. We could just say you must put charging stations in downtowns.
And that would help to address one of the conditions that was directly cited in the executive order for, putting a pause, which was the lack of convenient and abundant charging infrastructure. Well, let's fix that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I just want to add here that we were supposed to get a lot of money from the federal government for the National Electric Vehicle Initiative, and it's vanished because of the lack of belief and concern, lack of belief in climate change, and lack of, which is unbelievable, and lack of concern among people who might be able to step in and change that.
Yeah.
Quick question. Okay, can I, just a quick question. Does V-Trans adopt the new standards, they're going to call it something else, by rule, as opposed to having anything in legislation about it?
It is rule, but we're supposed to have it presented to us we're going to have it presented to us at some point,
Yeah.
but it is rule. It's their standards.
And they're doing outreach, in communities, right?
Do you want to call on folks?
Yeah, sure. Okay, Candace?
Yeah, thank you for that. So Representative Lally, clarify for me if you can, do we know when the Vermont State Standards are going to be finished and presented to us? Do we have a date for that?
We had it in the final version of the T-bill. We call it out. I can look it up.
And then my other question, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but Vermont, it's not that they're legislating, we can't have EV charging on roads. It's just that we don't have anything in legislation so far. I mean, they haven't legislated that you can't, we just haven't legislated that we should. Is that right?
Right. I think so. It's also, we can prioritize this in our policymaking. So to ensure that this is a part of the vision under the Vermont state standards. So, my understanding is they've kind of got their annotated outline. They know where they're headed, what they are trying to do. That took a while to do. They looked through many, many studies and so forth. Have the stakeholder buy-in to start working on the actual, delivery of outcomes. And it is, my understanding is that it is intended as guidance. So what that guidance means is kind of where we can have, I think policymaking can influence the scope of that guidance.
And Burlington is the only city in the state of Vermont that has its own legislation for the city to allow for on-street EV charging.
Well, they have class 1 status and they own many of their own roads, and they are, so they have the ability to do this, and sort of the culture of place that prioritizes
Other
it.
towns could do it too.
Yeah.
Town by
So
town.
if a town owns its own road, as opposed to the state owning it,
Right.
they could go ahead and, because I think, right, what one of our pages, Lila was saying was, so I think outside of Burlington, like we look in other towns, all the EV charging is on private property right now. So like at a brewery, at a,
Or municipal property. Yeah.
gas station, municipal.
What's more common, like are we usually owned by the town or the state?
Oh, it's a mix. It's a mix, yeah.
Yeah.
So usually if a town highway goes through a town, there's a certain segment of it that's called a class 1 town highway that the town has purview over, not totally, but more or less. And so it's a mixture.
So we can geek out on transportation topics forever,
Yeah.
but,
But
but
Serena
there
has-
are.
You really got the front row of people who can nerd out about this.
To sort of open it up to other things.
Funny, Kate, I know the mountain project is going through public comment.
Yes.
Closing.
Great,
on
yes.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
And so in all our towns, there are meetings happening where there's mapping going on, talking about growth and land use. And I just wonder if all of us either wrote a letter or.
These are the RPC maps. The RPCs were charged by the legislature with developing future land use designation zones under the land use reform that was passed. So yes, and that process is, at least in Chittenden, is open until Monday with our RPC. And so they're looking for comments. And this was like a great thing, because I know one of my frustrations is that transportation is integral to land use, yet is kind of operating in a sort of parallel zone with the land use changes that we adopted. So I don't know how well these things are talking to each other.
Is this document, can it be sent for public input? I mean, so that it is integrated into.
Yes, well, the CCRPC actually
I was wondering. about
worked
that.
on
I
this.
assume
All the
that-
RPCs worked together on this, so they're certainly well aware of it. But but I think that, to prioritize the role of transportation in realizing some of the goals in this document, a more holistic and integrated approach we can't say that enough.
So in terms of a public comment, what should we say? We want more public chargers. If we're going to get, write something up before Monday.
Yeah, make
Chargers.
make that, prioritize that, make that easier. And,
Anything else with transportation?
smart growth, transit-oriented development is another one. It's, a different topic, but, I introduced a bill, a short form bill in the Environment Committee for offsetting stormwater in these designation areas so that we can actually have the focus development on a smaller footprint. So, you know, we need new ways of thinking about this. All of our entire regime of land use regulations is very suburban. It still is. So we have this new vision of what we want to do, which is much more, you know, urban and then countryside, right? So we're trying to not have suburban. It's going to take a while to bring our regime of land use permitting rules up to in alignment with that. And that's kind of, that delays operationalizing the benefits of, you know, that land use reform. So, and Rebecca, would you
Liz.
speak to a little bit?
Leslie's had her hand up.
Okay,
She was
sorry.
next.
Leslie.
Thank you. I've obviously come from the healthcare perspective, and I really want to appreciate this work, but also the intersection with the Department of Health. We know, and you mentioned all the chronic diseases that we have in our world. Half of us die from heart-related disease, cardiovascular disease. These are preventable. And we're not moving enough upstream. You are, which is fantastic, which is what I want to bring up, to have us have a healthier population. And having a healthier population has important benefits like reducing healthcare costs, which is, you know, impacting everything, school budgets, you know, we go on and on. So I think that climate change is a thing, but the health of our population is this central idea that we really need focus on to reduce costs and for people to have better lives. So I do want to thank the health department and the work that you did, Kate, with them to create such a beautiful thing. I'm really interested in looking it over and seeing how it applies in different communities. And maybe that's what we need to think about next year as a public health caucus, how the intersection more deeply of health and everything else.
Think about what bills you want to bring forward.
Bills
around
and
there.
conversation and, you know, that the idea of that.
Can I just say one thing, which is I really appreciated in your slides, you had some images of like the umbrellas that were in like an overhang, so it provided shading. I think one of the things we don't talk enough about in Vermont is that with temperatures going up, the average Vermonter, their home is not built for a temperature increase. We're very used to cold temperatures. And the very high increase and humidity and all of that has a disproportionate impact on low income and senior Vermonters. And the way that we build our communities to have cooling spaces and designs that have trees, so it reduces the temperature in a village center, all of that stuff we can design for. And if we don't, older folks will have no place to go that is safe for them. They'll just be overheated and uncomfortable and sick.
Or in there.
And if I could add to that, you know, the idea of creating community, which is important for all of us, create village centers, walkable, engage us in each other.
Yeah.
So you wanted to hear from Rebecca?
Yeah, Rebecca has a very interesting bill that speaks to some of this.
Thank you to you, Kate, too, because you're a good mentor, and I've always been inspired by your vision for housing that is people friendly and environmentally friendly at the same time. And certainly this bill comes from that same place. It was a two-part bill. One piece is moving. The other piece was to look at what we were calling workforce zones. And that is to facilitate the development of housing near jobs and in places that are served by public transit. And this comes out of seeing a lot of development where it's one house on a single lot of 10 acres, where we're sort of paying over the state, and also forcing people to live much farther from where they were, which is both hard on health, because now you're spending an hour each way commuting, but it's also frankly hard. And then also I appreciate like we've talked a lot about health and all policies. I think we also need to talk about climate and all policies. And maybe this investment in workforce zones and job density is a way to slow climate change up and serve it. Just like how we intentionally place housing. So the purpose of the bill was going to identify those census tracts that have high job density, and interestingly, they're not all where you think they are, they're not all where you happy that way, but that is not true. And to try to identify regions around those census tracts, and then create overlays where we could target infrastructure investments in ways that take advantage of transport, and also take advantage of some of these municipal infrastructure investments to support that housing. So this would be a designated downtown or neighborhood, sort of like the other ones, but it would meet those environment, health benefit, smart growth, walkable downtown goals at the same time. So we hopefully will bring it back next year.
What's the bill number now?
Yeah, I forget, the bill number is 253. 253.
It seems like it really relates to the thinking around how to do CHIP most effectively, that your committee has been thinking about too.
It's a different approach. I mean, this was focusing on grants, which are more targeted and more direct.
Okay,
CHIP is passive, and it depends on the municipality, how it's putting forward.
but the this data you're gonna unearth about the census tracts would inform,
It would, but it's not.
yeah. Okay.
Cool. So we're coming up on 12:45. Are there any other thoughts or things people want to bring up?
I
Or
have one thought.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry. No.
One thought, I loved Kate's statistic about the 15% reduction in emissions from conservation. Because in addition to Act 181, another big bill from last session was our biodiversity bill. And so there's a lot of work coming and understanding coming from that act that I think we'll have to work with next session. And of course, that's a huge piece of that future land use mapping process, is understanding where do we really need to conserve as we're thinking about where we really want to develop.
Yeah, these are complementary things.
Yeah.
Phil.
And then I was going to talk about something else, but there's sort of a concept here with the state standards on transportation and this sort of regional look at where the jobs are and how do we provide the housing and the village, grow those villages around there. It tells me, like even in my town in Heinsberg, the reason we've got some sidewalks, the reason we have a dense village, zoning, it's all been just the town of Heinsberg doing this for the last 25 years. And we really need to look at things in a more regional, we need to provide small towns and villages the wherewithal to understand, we fight for grants to get them from the state. We really would like the state to come and help the towns and villages do this. So it's not, pockets of this improvement of lifestyles and health. It's a more regional, more statewide approach.
And then it becomes cyclical. Heinsberg has great sidewalks. The town next to it doesn't. Hartford has great sidewalks, but they're not connected to Heartland. You can't bike from one place to the other. It's great. I love the regional idea.
Beyond just each town and village.
And hopefully the standards will talk about
Yeah.
connectivity.
And I did not get an answer to the question of when the standards are out, but there are 3 phases to this plan. We are in phase 1. And the outline, the annotated outline was due to us last month. I don't think we got it. So it is in process.
From where?
From AOT. This is the street. I don't know where, we didn't get it, so I don't know, but. Okay, we have one other big announcement.
Any other questions?
That's for the outline.
Thank you, Public Health Caucus.
Yes, thank you.
And then,
Wait a minute, announcement about an event. So this is our last climate caucus, but we're having an event on Tuesday. All climate caucus members are invited to go down the street to the NRC down on Baldwin Street. And hopefully it'll be an outdoor event. Hopefully, Scott, you can come. And there's a rain date or a date if we're very delayed on the floor of Wednesday. So it's from 5 to 7 at 11 Baldwin Street. And we'll send out a notice about that too.
a casual but celebratory We held the line, Climate Caucus.
And that's
Order.
Tuesday, not Wednesday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday, the 20th.
Okay.
And we want it to be outside so you can be there.
So that's why if it's raining, we'd probably do it on Wednesdays. Does that work for you?
Okay. And before we wrap, I just want to say thank you to Jordan, thank you to Evelyn, thank you to all the advocates. All section, Jordan has procured the pizza and set up the logistics, and that is the hardest part. So thank you.
Molly, don't we have Casey on Tuesday?
Yeah, we have the what?
AC, yeah,
First hour.
Oh, I
yeah.
totally forgot about that. Wait a minute, we may have to change this because of KC.
We may, oh, did you just hear what Molly said?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I totally forgot about it when I was thinking about the best.
Yeah, Tuesdays.
So what do you think we should do here, Becca?